Chairman.
Yes. Katie Hill.
I move to table.
Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I was asking to be recognized before the motion.
The vote is so in tabling the motion.
You know who had this
to
material
postpone.
before all the
Excuse
members
me,
of the committee?
Excuse me.
CNN had it before
Sir.
we did. CNN had the exhibits
Sir.
before we did. Well, I just want to be recognized.
Yeah, well, the vote is on tabling the motion to postpone. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no.
No.
The ayes have it.
And I appeal the ruling of the chair. Yes, I can assure you it's in the rules. I appeal the ruling of the chair.
Do the rules matter, Mr. Chairman?
I
Move to
recognize
table.
the gentlelady.
Move to waive the rules.
There's a motion to
Move
table.
to table.
Chairman.
The vote.
Move
She
to
made
table.
two motions. What's the motion?
The vote is on tabling.
I move to table the appeal to the ruling of the chair.
The vote is on that. All in favor say aye. All opposed say no.
No.
The ayes have it.
I ask for a recorded vote, Mr. Chairman.
Very well. The clerk will call the roll.
On this vote, we have 24 yeses, 17 noes.
Motion to table is agreed to. Let me say this. You've made it clear that you do not want the American people to hear what Mr. Cohen has to say. But the American people have a right to hear him. So we're going to proceed. The American people can judge his credibility for themselves. Now,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
we did not say that. We just said we wanted to follow the rules. He didn't say stop the hearing. He just said postpone it so we could get his testimony and the exhibits when we were supposed to get them according to the rules of this committee. That's all we said. We didn't say we didn't want to hear from the guy. We just said we want to follow the rules.
Reclaiming my time. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to give an opening statement. Today, the committee will hear the testimony of Michael Cohen, President Donald Trump's longtime personal attorney and one of his closest and most trusted advisors over the last decade. On August 21st, Mr. Cohen appeared in federal court and admitted to arranging secret payoffs of hundreds of thousands of dollars on the eve of the election to silence women alleging affairs with Donald Trump. Mr. Cohen admitted to violating campaign finance laws and other laws. He admitted to committing these felonies, quote, in coordination with and at the direction of, unquote, President Trump. And he admitted to lying about his actions to protect the president. Some will certainly ask if Mr. Cohen was lying then, why should we believe him now?
Good question.
This is a legitimate question. As a trial lawyer for many years, I've faced this situation over and over again, and I ask the same question. Here is how I view our role. Every one of us in this room has a duty to serve as an independent check on the executive branch. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in search of the truth. The President has made many statements of his own, and now the American people have a right to hear the other side. They can watch Mr. Cohen's testimony and make their own judgment. We received a copy of Mr. Cohen's written statement late last night. It includes not only personal eyewitness accounts of meetings with Donald Trump as president inside the Oval Office, but it also includes documents and other corroborating evidence for some of Mr. Cohen's statements. For example, Mr. Cohen has provided a copy of a check sent while President Trump was in office with Donald Trump's signature on it to reimburse Mr. Cohen for the hush money payment to Stormy Daniels. This new evidence raises a host of troubling legal and ethical concerns about the President's actions in the White House and before. Would you all close that door, please? Thank you. This check is dated August 1st, 2017. 6 months later, in April of 2018, the President denied anything about it. In April of 2018, President Trump was flying on Air Force One when a reporter asked him the question, did you know about a $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels? The answer was, quote, no. A month after that, the President admitted to making payments to Mr. Cohen, but claimed they were part of a, quote, a monthly retainer, unquote, for legal services. This claim fell apart in August when federal prosecutors concluded, and I quote, in truth and in fact, there was no such retainer agreement, end of quote. Today, we will also hear Mr. Cohen's account of a meeting in 2016 in Donald Trump's office during which Roger Stone said over speakerphone that he had just spoken with Julian Assange, who said there would be a, quote, massive dump of emails that would damage Hillary Clinton's campaign, end of quote. According to Cohen, Mr. Trump replied, quote, wouldn't that be great, end of quote. The testimony that Michael Cohen will provide today, ladies and gentlemen, is deeply disturbing, and it should be troubling to all Americans. We will all have to make our own evaluation of the evidence and Mr. Cohen's credibility. As he admits, he has repeatedly lied in the past. I agree with Ranking Member Jordan that this is an important factor we need to weigh, but we must weigh it and we must hear from him. But where I disagree fundamentally with the Ranking Member involves his efforts to prevent the American people from hearing from Mr. Cohen. Mr. Cohen's testimony raises grave questions about the legality of President Donald Trump's conduct and the truthfulness of statements while he was president. We need to assess and investigate this new evidence as we uphold our constitutional our oversight responsibilities. And we will continue after today to gather more documents and testimony in our search for the truth. I have made it abundantly clear to Mr. Cohen that if he comes here today and he does not tell us the truth, I will be the first one to refer those untruthful statements to DOJ. So when people say he doesn't have anything to lose, he does have a lot to lose if he lies. And the American people, by the way, voted for accountability in November. And they have a right to hear Mr. Cohen in public so they can make their own judgments. Mr. Cohen's testimony is the beginning of the process, not the end. Ladies and gentlemen, the days of this committee protecting the president at all costs are over. They're over. Before I close, I want to comment about the scope of today's hearing. At the request of the House Intelligence Committee and my very good friend, Adam Schiff, Congressman Adam Schiff, the chairman, I intended, over the objections of the ranking member of our committee, to limit the scope of today's hearing to avoid questions about Russia. However, Mr. Cohen's written testimony, in his written testimony, he's made statements relating to Russia. And these are topics that we understand do not raise concern from the Department of Justice. So in fairness to the ranking member and all committee members, we will not restrict questions relating to the witness's testimony or related questions he is willing to answer. Finally, I remind members that we will need to remain mindful of those areas where there are ongoing Department of Justice investigations. Those scoping limitations have not changed. Finally, I remind members that we will need to remain mindful of those areas where there are ongoing Department of Justice investigations. Those scoping limitations have not changed. Finally, and to Mr. Cohen, Martin Luther King, Mr. Cohen, said some words that I leave with you today before you testify. He said, faith is taking the first step, even when you can't see the whole staircase. There comes a time when silence becomes betrayal. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that truly matter. In the end, he says, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And with that, I yield to the distinguished gentleman, the ranking member of our committee, Mr. Jordan.
Mr. Chairman, point of parliamentary inquiry.
Yes.
To the point
Mr.
that
Mr. Jordan is recognized. Mr. Jordan is recognized for his opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, here we go. Here we go. Your first big hearing, your first announced witness, Michael Cohen. I want everyone in this room to think about this. The first announced witness for the 116th Congress is a guy who is going to prison in 2 months for lying to Congress. Mr. Chairman, your chairmanship will always be identified with this hearing. And we all need to understand what this is. This is the Michael Cohen hearing presented by Lanny Davis. That's right. Lanny Davis choreographed the whole darn thing. The Clintons' best friend, loyalist, operative, Lanny Davis put this all together. You know how we know? He told our staff. He told the committee staff. He said the hearing was his idea. He selected this committee. He had to talk Michael Cohen into coming. And most importantly, he had to persuade the chairman to actually have it. He told us it took 2 months to get that job done, but here we are. He talked him into it. This might be the first time someone convicted of lying to Congress has appeared again so quickly in front of Congress. Certainly, it's the first time a convicted perjurer has been brought back to be a star witness in a hearing. And there's a reason this is the first, because no other committee would do it. Think about this. With Mr. Cohen here, this committee, we got lots of lawyers on this committee. This committee is actually encouraging a witness to violate attorney-client privilege. Mr. Chairman, when we legitimize dishonesty, we delegitimize this institution. We're supposed to pursue the truth, but you have stacked the deck against the truth. We're only allowed to ask certain questions. Even with that amendment you just told us about, well, Russia's now on the table. You initially told us we can't ask questions about the special counsel, can't ask questions about the Southern District of New York, can't ask questions about Russia. Nope. Nope. Only subjects we can talk about are ones you think are going to be harmful to the President of the United States. And the answers to those questions are going to come from a guy who can't be trusted. Here's what the U.S. Attorney said about Mr. Cohen. While Mr. Cohen enjoyed a privileged life, his desire for ever greater wealth and influence precipitated an extensive course of criminal conduct. Mr. Cohen committed 4 4 distinct federal crimes over a period of several years. He was motivated to do so by personal greed and repeatedly used his power and influence for deceptive ends. But the Democrats don't care. They don't care. They just want to use you, Mr. Cohen. You're their patsy today. They got to find somebody, somewhere, to say something so they can try to remove the president from office. Because Tom Steyer told him to. Tom Steyer, last week, organized a town hall. Guess where? Chairman Nadler's district in Manhattan. 2 nights ago, Tom Steyer organized a town hall. Guess where? Chairman Cummings' district in Baltimore. The best they can find to start this process, Michael Cohen. Fraudster, a cheat, convicted felon, and in 2 months a federal inmate. Well, actually, they didn't find him. Lanny Davis found him. I'll say one thing about the Democrats. They stick to the playbook. Remember how all this started. The Clinton campaign hired Perkins Coie law firm, who hired Glenn Simpson, who hired a foreigner, Christopher Steele, who put together the fake dossier that the FBI used to go get a warrant to spy on the Trump campaign. But when that whole scheme failed, and the American people said, we're going to make Donald Trump president, they said, we got to do something else. So now, Clinton loyalist, Clinton operative Lanny Davis has persuaded the chairman of the Oversight Committee to give a convicted felon a forum to tell stories and lie about the President of the United States so they can all start their impeachment process. Mr. Chairman, we are better than this. We are better than this. I yield back. Actually,
I wanted to note.
Mr. Chairman, actually, I have a motion.
Back.
I have a motion.
Gentleman is not recognized.
I have a motion under Rule 2K6 of Rule 11.
You yielded back, sir. You yielded back.
Mr. Chairman, you took 7 minutes. I took 4.
Well, the gentleman yielded back.
That's how you're going to operate? First, you don't follow the rules, and now you're going to say, so you don't get, you get to,
point of order.
you get to
order.
deviate from the rules.
Regular order.
I just have a simple motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
It's
I wanted
regular
to
order to
note-
have the testimony
excuse me.
24 hours in advance.
Excuse me. I wanted to note
addressed that.
under Rule 11, Clause 4, all media and photographers must be officially credentialed to record these proceedings and take photographs. I also want to briefly address the spectators in the hearing room today. We welcome you and we respect your right to be here. We also ask in turn for your respect as we proceed with the business of the committee today. It is the intention of the committee to proceed without any disruptions. Any disruptions of this committee will result in the United States Capitol Police restoring order and that protesters will be removed, and we are grateful for your presence here today and your cooperation. Now I want to welcome Mr. Cohen and thank him for participating in today's hearing. Mr. Cohen, if you would please rise, and I will begin to swear you in. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that the witness answered in the affirmative, and thank you, and you may be seated. The microphones are sensitive, so please speak directly into them. Without objection, your written statement will be made a part of the record. With that, Mr. Cohen, you are now recognized to give an oral presentation of your testimony. Is your mic on?
Yes. Chairman Cummings, Ranking Member Jordan, and members of the committee, thank you for inviting me here today. I have asked this committee to ensure that my family be protected from presidential threats and that the committee be sensitive to the questions pertaining to ongoing investigations. I thank you for your help and for your understanding. I am here under oath to correct the record to answer the committee's questions truthfully and to offer the American people what I know about President Trump. I recognize that some of you may doubt and attack me on my credibility. It is for this reason that I have incorporated into this opening statement documents that are irrefutable and demonstrate that the information you will hear is accurate and truthful. Never in a million years did I imagine, when I accepted a job in 2007 to work for Donald Trump, that he would one day run for the presidency, to launch a campaign on a platform of hate and intolerance, and actively win. I regret the day I said yes to Mr. Trump. I regret all the help and support I gave him along the way. I am ashamed of my own failings and publicly accepted responsibility for them by pleading guilty in the Southern District of New York. I am ashamed of my weakness and my misplaced loyalty, of the things I did for Mr. Trump in an effort to protect and promote him. I am ashamed that I chose to take part in concealing Mr. Trump's illicit acts rather than listening to my own conscience. I am ashamed because I know what Mr. Trump is. He is a racist, he is a con man, and he is a cheat. He was a presidential candidate who knew that Roger Stone was talking with Julian Assange about a WikiLeaks drop on Democratic National Committee emails. And I will explain each in a few moments. I am providing the committee today with several documents, and these include a copy of a check Mr. Trump wrote from his personal bank account after he became president to reimburse me for the hush money payments I made to cover up his affair with an adult film star and to prevent damage to his campaign. Copies of financial statements from 2011, 2012, and 2013 that he gave to such institutions such as Deutsche Bank. A copy of an article with Mr. Trump's handwriting on it that reported on the auction of a portrait of himself that he arranged for the bidder ahead of time and then reimbursed the bidder from the account of his nonprofit charitable foundation, with the picture now hanging in one of his country clubs. And copies of letters I wrote at Mr. Trump's direction that threatened his high school, colleges, and the college board not to release his grades or SAT scores. I hope my appearance here today, my guilty plea, and my work with law enforcement agencies are steps along a path of redemption that will restore faith in me and help this country understand our president better. And before going further, I want to apologize to each member, to you as Congress as a whole. The last time I appeared before Congress, I came to protect Mr. Trump. Today, I am here to tell the truth about Mr. Trump. I lied to Congress when Mr. Trump stopped negotiating the Moscow Tower project in Russia. I stated that we stopped negotiating in January of 2016. That was false. Our negotiations continued for months later during the campaign. Mr. Trump did not directly tell me to lie to Congress. That's not how he operates. In conversations we had during the campaign, at the same time I was actively negotiating in Russia for him, he would look me in the eye and tell me there's no Russian business, and then go on to lie to the American people by saying the same thing. In his way, he was telling me to lie. There were at least a half a dozen times between the Iowa caucus in January of 2016 and the end of June when he would ask me, How's it going in Russia? Referring to the Moscow Tower project. You need to know that Mr. Trump's personal lawyers reviewed and edited my statement to Congress about the timing of the Moscow Tower negotiations before I gave it. So to be clear, Mr. Trump knew of and directed the Trump-Moscow negotiations throughout the campaign and lied about it. He lied about it because he never expected to win. He also lied about it because he stood to make hundreds of millions of dollars on the Moscow real estate project. And so I lied about it too, because Mr. Trump had made clear to me, through his personal statements to me, that we both knew to be false, and through his lies to the country, that he wanted me to lie. And he made it clear to me because his personal attorneys reviewed my statement before I gave it to Congress. Over the past 2 years, I have been smeared as a rat by the President of the United States. The truth is much different. And let me take a brief moment to introduce myself. My name is Michael Dean Cohen, and I am a blessed husband of 24 years and a father to an incredible daughter and son. When I married my wife, I promised her that I would love her, I would cherish her, and I would protect her. As my father said countless times throughout my childhood, you, my wife, and you, my children, are the air that I breathe. So to my Laura, and to my Sammy, and to my Jake, there's nothing I wouldn't do to protect you. I have always tried to live a life of loyalty, friendship, generosity, and compassion. It's qualities my parents ingrained in my siblings and me since childhood. My father survived the Holocaust, thanks to the compassion and selfless acts of others. He was helped by many who put themselves in harm's way to do what they knew was right. And that is why my first instinct has always been to help those in need. And Mom and Dad, I am sorry I let you down. As the many people that know me best would say, I am the person that they call at 3 a.m. if they needed help. And I proudly remember being the emergency contact for many of my children's friends when they were growing up, because their parents knew that I would drop everything and care for them as if they were my own. Yet last fall, I pled guilty in federal court to felonies for the benefit of, at the direction of, and in coordination with individual number one. And for the record, individual number one is President Donald J. Trump. It is painful to admit that I was motivated by ambition at times. It is even more painful to admit many times I ignored my conscience when I should not have. Sitting here today, it seems unbelievable that I was so mesmerized by Donald Trump that I was willing to do things for him that I knew were absolutely wrong. For that reason, I have come here to apologize to my family, to my government, and to the American people. Accordingly, let me now tell you about Mr. Trump. I got to know him very well, working very closely with him for more than 10 years as his executive vice president and special counsel, and then as personal attorney when he became president. When I first met Mr. Trump, he was a successful entrepreneur, a real estate giant, and an icon. Being around Mr. Trump was intoxicating. When you were in his presence, you felt like you were involved in something greater than yourself, that you were somehow changing the world. I wound up touting the Trump narrative for over a decade. That was my job. Always stay on message. Always defend. it monopolized my life. At first, I worked mostly on real estate developments and other business transactions. Shortly thereafter, Mr. Trump brought me into his personal life and private dealings. Over time, I saw his true character revealed. Mr. Trump is an enigma. He is complicated, as am I. He is both good and bad, as do we all. But the bad far outweighs the good. And since taking office, he has become the worst version of himself. He is capable of behaving kindly, but he is not kind. He is capable of committing acts of generosity, but he is not generous. He is capable of being loyal, but he is fundamentally disloyal. Donald Trump is a man who ran for office to make his brand great, not to make our country great. He had no desire or intention to lead this nation, only to market himself and to build his wealth and power. Mr. Trump would often say this campaign was going to be the greatest infomercial in political history. He never expected to win the primary. He never expected to win the general election. The campaign, for him, was always a marketing opportunity. I knew early on in my work for Mr. Trump that he would direct me to lie to further his business interests. And I am ashamed to say that when it was for a real estate mogul in the private sector, I considered it trivial. As the president, I consider it significant and dangerous. But in the mix, lying for Mr. Trump was normalized, and no one around him questioned it. In fairness, no one around him today questions it either. A lot of people have asked me about whether Mr. Trump knew about the release of the hacked documents, the Democratic National Committee emails, ahead of time. And the answer is yes. As I earlier stated, Mr. Trump knew from Roger Stone in advance about the WikiLeaks drop of emails. In July of 2016, days before the Democratic convention, I was in Mr. Trump's office when his secretary announced that Roger Stone was on the phone. Mr. Trump put Mr. Stone on the speakerphone. Mr. Stone told Mr. Trump that he had just gotten off the phone with Julian Assange, and that Mr. Assange told Mr. Stone that within a couple of days, there would be a massive dump of emails that would damage Hillary Clinton's campaign. Mr. Trump responded by stating to the effect, "Wouldn't that be great?" Mr. Trump is a racist. The country has seen Mr. Trump court white supremacists and bigots. You have heard him call poorer countries shitholes. In private, he is even worse. He once asked me if I could name a country run by a black person that wasn't a shithole. This was when Barack Obama was president of the United States. And while we were once driving through a struggling neighborhood in Chicago, he commented that only black people could live that way. And he told me that black people would never vote for him because they were too stupid. And yet, I continued to work for him. Mr. Trump is a cheat. As previously stated, I am giving to the committee today 3 years of Mr. Trump's personal financial statements from 2011, 2012, and 2013, which he gave to Deutsche Bank to inquire about a loan to buy the Buffalo Bills and to Forbes. These are Exhibits 1A, 1B, and 1C to my testimony. It was my experience that Mr. Trump inflated his total assets when it served his purposes, such as trying to be listed amongst the wealthiest people in Forbes, and deflated his assets to reduce his real estate taxes. I'm sharing with you 2 newspaper articles, side by side, that are examples of Mr. Trump inflating and deflating his assets, as I said, to suit his financial interests. These are Exhibit 2 to my testimony. As I noted, I'm giving the committee today an article he wrote on and sent to me that reported on an auction of a portrait of Mr. Trump. This is Exhibit 3A to my testimony. Mr. Trump directed me to find a straw bidder to purchase a portrait of him that was being auctioned off at an Art Hamptons event. The objective was to ensure that this portrait, which was going to be auctioned last, would go for the highest price of any portrait that afternoon. The portrait was purchased by the fake bidder for $60,000. Mr. Trump directed the Trump Foundation, which is supposed to be a charitable organization, to repay the fake bidder, despite keeping the art for himself. And please see Exhibit 3B to my testimony. And it should come as no surprise that one of my more common responsibilities was that Mr. Trump directed me to call business owners, many of whom are small businesses that were owed money for their services, and told them that no payment or a reduced payment would be coming. When I asked Mr. Trump, or when I told Mr. Trump of my success, he actually reveled in it. And yet, I continued to work for him. Mr. Trump is a con man. He asked me to pay off an adult film star with whom he had an affair and to lie about it to his wife, which I did. And lying to the First Lady is one of my biggest regrets because she is a kind, good person, and I respect her greatly, and she did not deserve that. And I'm giving the committee today a copy of the $130,000 wire transfer from me to Ms. Clifford's attorney during the closing days of the presidential campaign that was demanded by Ms. Clifford to maintain her silence about her affair with Mr. Trump. And this is Exhibit 4 to my testimony. Mr. Trump directed me to use my own personal funds from a home equity line of credit to avoid any money being traced back to him that could negatively impact his campaign. And I did that too, without bothering to consider whether that was improper, much less whether it was the right thing to do or how would it impact me, my family, or the public. And I am going to jail in part because of my decision to help Mr. Trump hide that payment from the American people before they voted a few days later. As Exhibit 5A to my testimony shows, I am providing a copy of a $35,000 check that President Trump personally signed from his personal bank account on August 1st of 2017, when he was President of the United States, pursuant to the cover-up, which was the basis of my guilty plea to reimburse me, the word used by Mr. Trump's TV lawyer for the illegal hush money I paid on his behalf. This $35,000 check was one of 11 check installments that was paid throughout the year while he was president. Other checks to reimburse me for the hush money payments were signed by Donald Trump Jr. and Alan Weisselberg. And see for that example 5B. The President of the United States thus wrote a personal check for the payment of hush money as part of a criminal scheme to violate campaign finance laws. And you can find the details of that scheme directed by Mr. Trump in the pleadings in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York. So picture this scene. In February of 2017, 1 month into his presidency, I'm visiting President Trump in the Oval Office for the first time, and it's truly awe-inspiring. He's showing me all around and pointing to different paintings. And he says to me something to the effect of, "Don't worry, Michael. Your January and February reimbursement checks are coming." They were FedExed from New York, and it takes a while for that to get through the White House system. As he promised, I received the first check for the reimbursement of $70,000 not long thereafter. When I say con man, I'm talking about a man who declares himself brilliant, but directed me to threaten his high school, his colleges, and the college board to never release his grades or SAT scores. As I mentioned, I'm giving the committee today copies of a letter I sent at Mr. Trump's direction threatening these schools with civil and criminal actions if Mr. Trump's grades or SAT scores were ever disclosed without his permission. And these are under Exhibit 6. The irony wasn't lost on me at the time that Mr. Trump, in 2011, had strongly criticized President Obama for not releasing his grades. As you can see in Exhibit 7, Mr. Trump declared, "Let him show his records," after calling President Obama a terrible student. The sad fact is that I never heard Mr. Trump say anything in private that led me to believe he loved our nation or wanted to make it better. In fact, he did the opposite. When telling me in 2008 or 2009 that he was cutting employees' salaries in half, including mine, he showed me what he claimed was a $10 million IRS tax refund. And he said that he could not believe how stupid the government was for giving someone like him that much money back. During the campaign, Mr. Trump said that he did not consider Vietnam veteran and prisoner of war Senator John McCain to be a hero because he likes people who weren't captured. At the same time, Mr. Trump tasked me to handle the negative press surrounding his medical deferment from the Vietnam draft. Mr. Trump claimed it was because of a bone spur, but when I asked for medical records, he gave me none and said that there was no surgery. He told me not to answer the specific questions by reporters, but rather offer simply the fact that he received a medical deferment. He finished the conversation with the following comment: "You think I'm stupid? I'm not going to Vietnam." And I find it ironic, Mr. President, that you are in Vietnam right now. And yet, I continue to work for him. Questions have been raised about whether I know of direct evidence that Mr. Trump or his campaign colluded with Russia. I do not. And I want to be clear, but I have my suspicions. Sometime in the summer of 2017, I read all over the media that there had been a meeting in Trump Tower in June of 2016 involving Don Jr. and others from the campaign with Russians, including a representative of the Russian government, and an email setting up the meeting with the subject line, "Dirt on Hillary Clinton." Something clicked in my mind. I remembered being in a room with Mr. Trump, probably in early June of 2016, when something peculiar happened. Don Trump Jr. came into the room and walked behind his father's desk, which in and of itself was unusual. People didn't just walk behind Mr. Trump's desk to talk to him. And I recall Don Jr. leaning over to his father and speaking in a low voice, which I could clearly hear, and saying, "The meeting is all set." And I remember Mr. Trump saying, "Okay, good, let me know." What struck me as I looked back and thought about the exchange between Don Jr. and his father was, first, that Mr. Trump had frequently told me and others that his son Don Jr. had the worst judgment of anyone in the world, and also that Don Jr. would never set up any meeting of significance alone, and certainly not without checking with his father. I also knew that nothing went on in Trump world, especially the campaign, without Mr. Trump's knowledge and approval. So I concluded that Don Jr. was referring to that June 2016 Trump Tower meeting about dirt on Hillary with the Russian representatives when he walked behind his dad's desk that day, and that Mr. Trump knew that was the meeting Don Jr. was talking about when he said, "That's good, let me know." Over the past year or so, I have done some real soul searching, and I see now that my ambition and the intoxication of Trump power had much to do with the bad decisions, in part, that I made. And to you, Chairman Cummings and Ranking Member Jordan, and the other members of this committee, and the members of the House and Senate, I am sorry for my lies and for lying to Congress. And to our nation, I am sorry for actively working to hide from you the truth about Mr. Trump when you needed it most. For those who question my motives for being here today, I understand. I have lied, but I am not a liar. And I have done bad things, but I am not a bad man. I have fixed things, but I am no longer your fixer, Mr. Trump. And I am going to prison and have shattered the safety and security that I tried so hard to provide for my family. My testimony certainly does not diminish the pain that I have caused my family and my friends. Nothing can do that. And I have never asked for, nor would I accept, a pardon from President Trump. And by coming today, I have caused my family to be the target of personal, scurrilous attacks by the President and his lawyer, trying to intimidate me from appearing before this panel. Mr. Trump called me a rat for choosing to tell the truth, much like a mobster would do when one of his men decides to cooperate with the government. And as Exhibit 8 shows, I have provided the committee with copies of tweets that Mr. Trump posted, attacking me and my family. And only someone burying his head in the sand would not recognize them for what they are. It's encouragement to someone to do harm to me and my family. I never imagined that he would engage in vicious, false attacks on my family and unleash his TV lawyer to do the same. And I hope this committee and all members of Congress on both sides of the aisle make it clear that as a nation, we should not tolerate attempts to intimidate witnesses before Congress, and attacks on family are out of bounds and not acceptable. And I wish to especially thank Speaker Pelosi for her statements, and it's Exhibit 9, to protect this institution and me, and the chairman of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Adam Schiff, and you, Chairman Cummings, for likewise defending the institution and my family against the attacks by Mr. Trump, and also the many Republicans who have admonished the President as well. I am not a perfect man. I have done things I am not proud of, and I will live with the consequences of my actions for the rest of my life. But today, I get to decide the example that I set for my children and how I attempt to change how history will remember me. I may not be able to change the past, but I can do right by the American people here today. And I thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer the committee's questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cohen. I now recognize myself. Mr. Cohen, before I start, I want to make sure you really understand something. You have admitted lying to Congress, to this very body, and now you're going to prison for it. Do you Mr. Cohen, recognize the gravity of your offenses? You are a lawyer, right?
As of yesterday, I am no longer a lawyer. I have lost my law license, amongst other things.
But you understand the gravity of this moment.
I most certainly do, Mr. Chairman.
I want you to really hear this, Mr. Cohen. We will not tolerate lying to this Congress by anybody. We're in search of the truth. Do you understand that?
I do.
Now, the President has also made numerous statements that turned out to be inaccurate. For example, he said he knew nothing about the hush money payments to Ms. Clifford. And his 2017 financial disclosure form said he never owed money to reimburse you for those payments. Yet, in your testimony, Mr. Cohen, you said that you met with the President in the Oval Office in February of 2017 and discussed his plans to reimburse you for money you paid. You say he told you, and I quote, "Don't worry, Michael, your January and February reimbursement checks are coming." Is that accurate? And was that in the Oval Office?
The statement is accurate, but the discussions regarding the reimbursement occurred long before he became president.
Would you explain that?
Back in 2017, when, actually I apologize, in 2016, prior to the election, I was contacted by Keith Davidson, who is the attorney, or was the attorney for Ms. Clifford, for Stormy Daniels. And after several rounds of conversations with him about purchasing her life rights for $130,000, what I did each and every time is go straight into Mr. Trump's office and discuss the issue with him. When it was ultimately determined, and this was days before the election, that Mr. Trump was going to pay the $130,000. In the office with me was Alan Weisselberg, the chief financial officer of the Trump Organization. He acknowledged to Alan that he was going to pay the $130,000 and that Alan and I should go back to his office and figure out how to do it. So yes, sir, I stand by the statement that I gave, but there was a history to it.
In your testimony, you said you bought some checks. Is that right? You said you bought some checks.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you about one of these. This from the Trump Trust that holds the president businesses. Can you tell me who signed this check?
I believe that the top signature is Donald Trump Jr. And the bottom signature, I believe, is Alan Weisselberg's.
And can you tell me the date of that check?
March 17th of 2017.
Now, wait a minute, hold up. The date on the check is after President Trump held his big press conference claiming that he gave up control of his businesses. How could the president have arranged for you to get this check if he was supposedly playing no role in his business?
Because the payments were designed to be paid over the course of 12 months, and it was declared to be a retainer for services that would be provided for the year of 2017.
Was there a retainer agreement?
There is no retainer agreement.
Would Don Jr. or Mr. Weisselberg have more information about that?
Mr. Weisselberg, for sure, about the entire discussions and negotiations prior to the election, and Don Jr. would have cursory information.
Now, here's another one. This one appears to be signed by Donald Trump himself. Is that his signature?
That is Donald Trump's signature.
So let me make sure I understand. Donald Trump wrote you a check out of his personal account while he was serving as President of the United States of America to reimburse you for hush money payments to Ms. Clifford. Is that what you are telling the American people today?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
One final question. The President claimed he knew nothing about these payments. His ethics filing said he owed nothing to you. Based on your conversations with him, is there any doubt in your mind that President Trump knew exactly what he was paying for?
There is no doubt in my mind, and I truly believe there is no doubt in the mind of the people of the United States of America.
And these new documents that corroborate what you just told us. With that, I'll yield to the gentleman from the gentleman and ranking member.
I will make sure that you and I meet one day while we're in the courthouse, and I will take you for every penny you still don't have, and I will come after your daily beast and everybody else that you possibly know. So I'm warning you, tread very effing lightly, because what I'm going to do to you is going to be effing disgusting. You understand me? Mr. Cohen, who said that?
I did.
And did you say that, Mr. Cohen, in your testimony on page 2, you said you did things for Mr. Trump in an effort to protect him. Was that statement that I just read that you admitted to saying, did you do that to protect Donald Trump?
I did it to protect Mr. Trump, Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka Trump, and Eric Trump.
And in your sentencing statement back in December in front of the judge, you said this, Mr. Cohen, my weakness can be characterized as a blind loyalty to Donald Trump, a blind loyalty that led me to choose a path of darkness. Is that accurate, Mr. Cohen?
I wrote that.
You wrote that and said that in front of the judge. Is that right?
That's correct.
Let me read a few other things here, and let me ask you why you did some of these things. When you filed a false tax return in 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2016, was all that out of blind loyalty to the president?
No, it was not.
When you failed to report $4 million in income to the Internal Revenue Service, did you do that to protect Donald Trump?
No, I did not.
And when you failed to pay $1.4 million in taxes, I got constituents who don't make that in a lifetime. When you failed to pay $1.4 million in taxes to the U.S. Treasury, was that out of some blind loyalty to the President of the United States?
It was not, but the number was 1.38 and change, and I have paid that money back to the IRS at this time.
I think the American people will appreciate that 1.3.
And I would also just like to say it was over a course of 5 years, approximately $260,000 a year.
Yeah, and that's what I said, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2000, that's 5 years.
Yes.
Got it. When you made false statements to financial institutions concerning a home equity line of credit, taxi medallions, and your Park Avenue apartment in 2013, 2014, and 2015, and you pled guilty to making those false statements to those banks, was that all done to protect the president?
No, it was not.
How about this one? When you created the fake Twitter account, Women for Cohen, and paid a firm to post tweets like this one, in a world of lies, deception, and fraud, we appreciate this honest guy at Michael Cohen, hashtag TGIF, hashtag handsome, hashtag sexy. Was that done to protect the president?
Mr. Jordan, I didn't actually set that up. It was done by a young lady that worked for Red Finch, and during the course of the campaign, which you would know gets somewhat crazy and wild, we were having fun. That's what it was, sir. We were having fun.
Was it done to protect the president?
That was not done to protect the president.
Was it a fake Twitter account?
That was, no, that was a real Twitter account. It exists.
You pay a firm to create this
I didn't
account,
pay the firm
Women
to
for
do
Cohen.
that. It was done by a young lady that works for the firm. And again, sir, we were having fun during a stressful time.
The point is, Mr. Cohen, did you lie to protect the president or did you lie to help yourself?
I'm not sure how that helped me, sir.
I'm not sure how it did either.
Right. And I would
point
like
is,
to
I
also
think-
note that more than half the people
And
on
here's
that
the
site
point.
are men.
Here's the point. The chairman just gave you a 30-minute opening statement, and you have a history of lying over and over and over again, and frankly, you don't have to take my word for it. Take what the court said. Take what the Southern District of New York said. Cohen did crimes that were marked by a pattern of deception and that permeated his professional life. These crimes were distinct in their harms, but bear a common set of circumstances. They each involved deception and were each motivated by personal greed and ambition. A pattern of deception for personal greed and ambition, and you just got 30 minutes of an opening statement where you trashed the President of the United States of America. Mr. Cohen, how long did you work for Donald Trump?
Approximately a decade.
10 years?
That's correct.
You said all these bad things about the President there in that last 30 minutes, and yet you worked for him for 10 years? All those bad things, I mean, if it's that bad, I can see you working for him for 10 days, maybe 10 weeks, maybe even 10 months. But you worked for him for 10 years. Mr. Cohen, how long did you work in the White House?
I never worked in the White House.
And that's the point, isn't it, Mr. Cohen?
No, sir.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not, sir.
You wanted to work in the White House.
No, sir.
You didn't get brought to the dance.
Sir.
And now?
I was extremely proud to be personal attorney to the President of the United States of America. I did not want to go to the White House. I was offered jobs. I can tell you a story of Mr. Trump reaming out Reince Priebus because I had not taken a job where Mr. Trump wanted me to, which is working with Don McGahn at the White House General Counsel's
Mr. Cohen,
office.
you work for the President.
Sir, one second. All right. What I said at the time, and I brought a lawyer in who produced a memo as to why I should not go in because there would be no attorney-client privilege, and in order to handle some of the matters that I talked about in my opening, that it would be best suited for me not to go in, and that every president had a personal
Cohen, here's
attorney.
what I see. Here's what I see. I see a guy who worked for 10 years and is here trashing the guy he worked for 10 years, didn't get a job in the White House, and now you're behaving just like everyone else who's got fired or didn't get the job they wanted, like Andy McCabe, like James Comey, same kind of selfish motivation after you don't get the thing you want. That's what I see here today, and I think that's what the American people.
Mr. Jordan, all I wanted was what I got, to be personal attorney to the President, to enjoy the senior year of my son in high school and waiting for my daughter who was graduating from college to come back to New York. I got exactly what I want.
Exactly what you want?
What I wanted. That's right.
Gentlemen,
I received exactly what I wanted.
Gentlemen's time has expired.
Knowing how Mr. Trump operates with his winning at all costs mentality, do you believe that he would cooperate or collude with a foreign power to win the presidency? Is he capable of that?
It calls on so much speculation, ma'am. It would be unfair for me to
I understand,
give
but
an
you
answer
have
to
a
that.
tremendous amount of experience, given
Mr.
what
Trump
you testified today.
is all about winning, and he will do what is necessary
and in
within
your
which to win.
opinion and experience, would he have the potential to cooperate or collude with a foreign power to win the presidency at all costs?
Yes.
Based on what you know, would Mr. Trump, or did he, lie about colluding and coordinating with the Russians at any point during the campaign?
So as I stated in my testimony, I wouldn't use the word colluding. Was there something odd about the back and forth praise with President Putin? Yes, but I'm not really sure that I can answer that question in terms of collusion. I was not part of the campaign. I don't know the other conversations that Mr. Trump had with other individuals. There's just so many dots that all seem to lead to the same direction.
And finally, before my time expires, Mr. Cohen, the campaign and the entire Trump organization appeared to be filthy with Russian contact. There are Russian business contacts. There are campaign Russian contacts. There are lies about all of those contacts. And then we have Roger Stone informing the president just before the Democratic National Convention that that WikiLeaks was going to drop documents in the public arena that we knew at that point were hacked and stolen by Russia from the Democratic National Committee.
The gentle lady's time has expired. You may answer her inquiry.
My question is,
Quickly.
given all those connections, is it likely that Donald Trump was fully aware and had every intent of working with Russia to help make sure that he could win the presidency at all costs?
Okay, so let me say that this is a matter that's currently being handled by the House Select and the Senate Select Intelligence Committees, and so I would rather not answer that specific question other than just to tell you that Mr. Trump's desire to win would have him work with anyone. And one other thing that I had said in my statement is that when it came to the Trump Tower Moscow project, it was worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and we never expected to win the election. So this was just business as usual.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Great of Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Jordan, the chairman and this committee have promised members of the American people a fair and open process. Yet the Democrats have vastly limited the scope of this hearing. They've issued a gag order to try to tell members of this committee what we can and cannot talk about. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle claim that they want the truth, that they want transparency and fair oversight. Yet the Democrats' witness to testify before Congress today is none other than a scorned man who's going to prison for lying to Congress. Let that sink in. He's going to prison for lying to Congress, and he's the star witness to Congress. If you read the sentencing report on Mr. Cohen, words like deceptive and greedy are scattered throughout that report. It paints a picture of a narcissist, a bully, who cannot tell the truth, whether it's about the president or about his own personal life. But today, he's the majority party's star witness. If the Democrats were after the truth, they'd have an honest person here testifying. And if they were really after the truth, they'd not restrict the questioning to just a few topics. But let's take a look at those restricted topics. Mr. Chairman, the first topic in your limited scope that I can ask Mr. Cohen is about the president's debts. But, Mr. Chairman, didn't Mr. Cohen plead guilty to lying to banks about his personal finances? So we're asking a guy going to jail for lying about his debts to comment about the president's debts. He's the expert. Mr. Chairman, your next couple of topics say that I can ask Mr. Cohen about the president's compliance with financial disclosures and campaign finance laws, but didn't Mr. Cohen on 2 occasions break campaign finance law with his own donations? So again, the majority party's star witness on the president's compliance is a guy who broke compliance laws himself. Mr. Chairman, you graciously allow us to ask questions of Mr. Cohen on the president's dealings with the IRS and tax law. Your star witness here broke the law with regards to the IRS at least 5 times. He pled guilty on cheating on his taxes, lying to the IRS. He's the best witness you got. Next up, with the permission of the chairman, I get to ask Mr. Cohen about his perspective on the president's business dealings. Let me get this straight. The witness lied to multiple financial institutions to get loans to pay off other loans just to keep himself afloat, and he's going to be the expert on business practices. Obviously, Mr. Chairman, the witness may produce documents that he suggests incriminates the president, yet he lies to banks. All of those lies were done on fraudulent documents, documents that he forged. Nothing he says or produces has any credibility. Apparently, he even lied about delivering his own child, which his wife had to correct the record of. Ladies and gentlemen, how on earth is this witness credible? With all the lies and deception, the self-serving fraud, it begs the question, what is the majority party doing here? No one can see this guy as credible. He will say whatever he wants to accomplish his own personal goals. He's a fake witness, and his presence here is a travesty. I hope the American people see through this. I know the people back in Tennessee will. And with that statement, sir, I have a few questions of the witness. With your loss of your law license, I think you mentioned in your opening statement that you had been disbarred. What is your source of income in the future?
I don't expect I'm going to have a source of income when I'm in federal penitentiary.
What, is there a book deal coming or anything like that?
I have no book deal right now in the process. I have been contacted by many, including for television, a movie. If you want to tell me who you would like to play you, I'm more than happy to write the name down.
I'm sure
But I
there's
will
a very
also like to
attractive
turn
man.
around and just to correct your statement on me. No
Well, let me ask one
individual-
other question, though. I only have a limited amount of time.
No individual-
One quick question. Who paid your expenses to be here today?
Who's paid my expenses?
To be here today.
I paid my expenses.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to yield the remaining of my time to the ranking member.
Mr. Cohen, how many times you talked to the special counsel's office?
7.
Did they talk to you at all in preparation for today's hearing between the 7 times you talked to him prior to your sentencing? Have you had any conversations with the special counsel's office between sentencing and today?
I'm sorry, sir, I don't understand your question.
You talked to him 7 times. That's in the sentencing memorandums that were in front of the court back in December. What I'm asking is how many times have you talked to the special counsel's office since then up to today's appearance here in Congress?
The gentleman's time has expired. You may answer the question now. That one question.
I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to that.
Mr. Maloney.
I think the gentleman for you. I would just make one point. We just had a 5-minute debate where Mr. Cohen disputes what the Southern District of New York found, what the judge found, that he was actually guilty of committing bank fraud. If this statement back here doesn't say it all, Cohen's consciousness of wrongdoing is fleeting, his remorse is minimal, his instinct is to blame others is strong. There's only one wrong with that statement. His remorse is non-existent. He just debated a member of Congress saying, I really didn't do anything wrong with the false bank things that I'm guilty of and going to prison for.
Mr. Jordan,
That
that's not
underscores
what
why
I
this is
said,
wrong.
and you know that that's not what I said.
exactly what
Well,
I
the gentleman,
said
you-
I pled guilty, and I take responsibility for my actions. Shame on you, Mr. Jordan.
Mr.
That's
Chair,
not what I said. Shame on you.
Mr. Chairman.
That's not what I said. What I said is I took responsibility, and I take responsibility. What I was doing is explaining to the gentleman that his facts are inaccurate. I take responsibility for my mistakes. All right? I am remorseful, and I am going to prison. I will be away from my wife and family for years. So before you turn around
all
and you
feel
cast
bad.
more
I
dispersion,
understand that.
please understand,
I
there are
understand.
people watching you today that know me a whole lot, but I made mistakes. I own them, and I didn't fight with the Southern District of New York. I didn't put the system through an entire scenario. But what I did do is I pled guilty, and I am going to be, again, going to prison.
Mr. Beddoes.
Mr. Cohen, do you know Lynn Patton? I'm right here.
Oh, yes, sir.
Do you know Lynn Patton?
Yes, I do.
I asked Lynn to come today in her personal capacity to actually shed some light. How long have you known Ms. Patton?
I'm responsible for Lynn Patton joining the Trump Organization and the job that she currently holds.
Well, I'm glad you acknowledged that, because you made some very demeaning comments about the president that Ms. Patton doesn't agree with. In fact, it has to do with your claim of racism. She says that as a daughter of a man born in Birmingham, Alabama, that there is no way that she would work for an individual who was racist. How do you reconcile the two of those, Mr.
As neither should I, as the son of a Holocaust survivor.
But, Mr. Cohen, I guess what I'm saying is I've talked to the president over 300 times. I've not heard one time a racist comment out of his mouth in private. So how do you reconcile it? Do you have proof of those conversations?
I would ask you to
Do you have tape recordings of those conversations?
No, sir.
Well, you've taped everybody else. Why wouldn't you have a tape?
That's also not true, sir. That's not true.
You haven't taped anybody?
I have taped individuals.
How many times have you taped individuals?
Maybe 100 times over 10 years.
Is that a low estimate? Because I've heard it's over 200 times.
No, I don't think. I think it's approximately about 100 from what I recall. But I would ask
So
you,
why
if
would
you ask me a
but
question,
if,
sir.
Do you have
so
proof?
Here's,
do you have proof?
I
Yes or
do.
no?
I do.
Oh, where's the proof?
Ask Ms. Patton how many people who are black are executives at the Trump Organization, and the answer is zero.
Mr. Cohen, we can go through this. I would ask unanimous consent that her entire statement be put in the record.
Without objection.
All right, let me go on a little bit further. Did you collect $1.2 million or so from Novartis
I did.
for access to the Trump administration?
No, sir.
Why did you collect it?
Because they came to me based upon my knowledge of the enigma, Donald Trump, what he thinks.
So they paid you,
sir, please let me finish.
No, did they pay you $1.2 million to
yes.
give them advice?
Yes, they did. A multi-billion-dollar conglomerate came to me looking for information, not something that's unusual here in D.C., looking for information, and they believed that I had a value.
So how many times did you meet with them?
Was the insight that I was capable of offering them.
How many
and they
times?
were willing to pay.
How many times did you meet with them? For $1.2 million, how many times did you meet with them?
I provided them with both in-person as well as telephone access whenever they needed.
How many times? Yes, sir. That's a question, Mr. Cohen.
I don't recall, sir.
So did you ever talk to them?
I spoke to them on several occasions, yes.
How many?
6 times.
6 times. Wow. $200,000 a call.
Sir, I also would like to.
All right,
I also would like to bring
this
to
is
your
my
attention
5
the
minutes, Mr.
contract.
Cohen, not yours. Did you get money from the Bank of Kazakhstan?
It's not a Bank of Kazakhstan. It's called BTA.
BTA Bank, Kazakhstan BTA Bank. Did you get money from them?
I did.
For what purpose?
The purpose was because the former CEO of that bank had absconded with it was between $4 to $6 billion, and some of that money was here in the United States, and they sought my assistance in terms of locating that money and helping them to recollect it.
So are you saying that all the reports that you were paid, in some estimates over $4 million, to have access and understanding of the Trump administration, you're saying that all of that was just paid to you just because you're a nice guy?
Well, I am a nice guy, but more importantly,
I would beg to differ. The record reflects that you're not a nice guy.
Each and every contract contained the clause in my contracts that said, I will not lobby and I do not do government relations work. In fact, Novartis sent me their contract, which stated specifically that they wanted me to lobby, that they wanted me to provide access to government, including the president. That information, that paragraph was crossed out by me, initialed, and written in my own handwriting. It says, I will not lobby or do government relations work.
So Novartis representatives say that it was like they were hiring a non-registered lobbyist. So you disagree with that?
I don't know what they said, sir, but the contract speaks for itself.
Have you ever contacted anybody in the administration?
Yes.
To advocate on behalf of any aspect of any of your contracts? I ask unanimous consent, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent.
The gentleman's time has expired. You may answer the question.
I don't know what you're referring to, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Clay.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I want to ask unanimous consent to put into the record an article from STAT which indicates that Mr. Cohen's promise to access not just Trump, but also the circle around him. It was almost as if we were hiring a lobbyist, close quote. I ask unanimous consent.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that we put into the record a criminal referral for violating Section 22 U.S.C. Of the statute number 611. I ask unanimous consent that my letter referring Mr. Cohen for violating FARA for illegal lobbying activity be entered into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
I ask unanimous consent that the first order of business for this committee is for us to look in a bipartisan way at criminal referrals at the next business meeting.
No. These are not documents. They're objections. They're objections.
So we're objecting to a unanimous consent request? Is that what, Mr. Chairman?
I'll take care of Heist. Don't worry.
I
yes.
I will yield back.
All right. Now, let me be clear. Mr. Heiss, I'm going to give you your whole 5 minutes, all right?
Thank you, Mr.
In
Chairman.
fairness to you, all right?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Meadows, the chairman made me, the ranking member, made me aware that I had given a little more time to Ms. Wasserman Schultz. I was going to let you do that anyway. But I just want the committee to know that because there are so many members, I'm going to be strict on this 5 minutes, all right? All right, thank you very much. Mr. Heiss, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cohen, you claim that you've lied, but you're not a liar. Just to set the record straight, if you lied, you are a liar by definition. You also said a moment ago that the facts are inaccurate. If they are facts, they are accurate, and that would make you inaccurate. But I'd like to take a moment to, I'd like to know who you consulted with to prepare for today's hearing, Lanny Davis and who else?
I consulted with my counsel, Lanny Davis, as well as Michael Monaco.
All right. Did you or Michael or Lanny Davis or anyone else cooperate with the Democratic majority to prepare for this hearing?
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
Did you or anyone else on your team cooperate with the Democrat Party in preparing for this hearing?
We've spoken to the party.
Okay. Did you prepare with Chairman Cummings or anyone on your team?
I'm sorry, what do you mean by prepare?
Prepare for this hearing.
Prepare, I prepared with my counsel.
Did you prepare with the Democrat majority or Chairman Cummings?
We spoke with Chairman Cummings and the party.
With Chairman Schiff?
Spoke with Chairman Schiff and his people as well.
Were there any other individuals acting as a liaison for you with the majority party?
I'm sorry, sir. What are you saying?
Did you have a liaison other than these that you've mentioned who were working with the majority to prepare for this hearing?
We spoke with the various individuals that you just raised, yes.
Tom Steyer, regarding him or any of his representatives, anyone associated with him, is he or any of them paying Lanny Davis to represent you?
Not that I'm aware of.
Who is paying Lanny Davis?
At the present moment, no one.
So he's doing all this work for nothing?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I hope so.
I kind of doubt it. But how did Lanny Davis come to represent you? Did he approach you or did you approach him?
I reached out to Lanny Davis at the recommendation of my former counsel over at McDermott, Will, and Emery, who knew Mr. Davis, and Mr.
So you reached out to Mr. Davis?
I did, yes, initially.
Okay. So did you want to testify before Congress, or did he urge you to testify here?
I was asked to come here, and I am here, sir, voluntarily, because it's my decision.
You were asked by who? My question, did he ask you to come here?
No, sir.
Okay, because he says that he did ask you to come here and that he convinced you, and also that he did the same with Chairman Cummings as well. So your testimony here is that you approached Lanny Davis to represent you and to come here. He did not persuade you to come here.
He did not persuade me. Actually, Chairman Cummings, which is part of the conversations that we engaged in with his people, as well as Chairman Schiff and others, we spoke in order to ask me to come here voluntarily.
I find the connecting of the dots here with Mr. Davis and you, and frankly the chairman and perhaps others, to be rather stunning that there is an agenda for all this happening here today. And I believe, frankly, that that's to bring the president down, to impugn the president. You made an oath last time you were here, and that oath meant nothing to you then. We had an oath here in this very room about a month ago, and it was, quote, "Be clear that I will seek the truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God," end quote. That sounds like an oath to me. The chairman made that statement in this very room last month, but here we are today, our first big hearing, with, as you and we all know, convicted liar, lying to Congress, a criminal. And I believe this witness is totally incompatible with the stated goal of having to seek the truth in this hearing. This is the first time in the history of Congress we have someone testifying here who has already been convicted of lying to Congress. So congratulations for being the first in Congress to do that, and Mr. Cummings as well. I can't believe we have brought this committee to its knees in terms of losing its credibility, and it's a shameful mockery of what our purpose is. I yield back.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Oh, I appreciate the gentleman for yielding. I just want to respond to Mr. Lynch. I want you to think about this. When have you ever seen a federal agency where this has happened? James Comey, director, fired. Andy McCabe, deputy director, fired. Lied 3 times under oath, under investigation, right, as we speak. Jim Baker, FBI counsel, demoted, then left, currently under investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Connecticut. Lisa Page, demoted, then left. Peter Strzok, deputy head of counterintelligence, demoted, then fired. That's what happened. That's what we're concerned about. And today we actually asked for Rod Rosenstein. Oh, by the way, we now know 3 people have told us Rod Rosenstein actually was contemplating using the 25th Amendment to remove the guy from presidency who the American people put there. And the chairman said no. And instead we get 30 minutes from a guy who's going to prison in 2 months for lying to Congress. Mr. Cohen, I got 2 quick questions before I yield back to my colleague. Mr. Heiss asked you who all you've talked to. You said you spoke to Mr. Schiff. Obviously, you spoke to Mr. Cummings. You're going in front of both committees. You're here today. You're going to be in front of Mr. Schiff's committee tomorrow. Have you spoken to Chairman Nadler or anyone on his staff, or have any of your attorneys spoken to Chairman Nadler?
I don't know about my attorneys. I have not spoken to
you don't know if your attorneys have
I have not spoken to Congressman Nadler. And I'm not aware, sir, I'm not aware if my attorneys, I can ask them.
Can turn around and ask it.
The answer, sir, is no.
Okay. And you said at this present time, Mr. Davis is not getting paid. Are you anticipating him receiving some kind of compensation in the future?
When I start to earn a living.
He's going to wait 3 years? Yeah. Wow.
The answer is yes.
That's a first. I've never known a lawyer wait 3 years to get paid.
I guess he thinks it's important.
All right. With that, I yield to the gentleman from Arizona. Mr. Cohen, in your sentencing statement to the court in December of last year, you said, I want to apologize to the people of the United States. You deserve to know the truth. Approximately a month later, BuzzFeed News ran a story that was the story in the country for a couple days. BuzzFeed story ran January 17th, 2019. On January 18th, your counsel went on TV and wouldn't confirm or deny the story. The next day, the special counsel's office did something that's never happened. Never happened. They said the description of specific statements to the special counsel's office and the characterization of documents and testimony obtained by this office regarding Michael Cohen's congressional testimony are not accurate. Why didn't your lawyer, the day that he's on TV, when this story is the biggest thing in the news in the country, why didn't he deny the BuzzFeed story?
Because I didn't think it was his responsibility to do that. We are not the fact checkers for BuzzFeed.
He's on TV to talk about the very story you committed to the court when you were trying to get your sentence reduced, that the American people deserve to know the truth. You had the golden opportunity to give them the truth on a false story, the BuzzFeed story, and your lawyer didn't say a thing. He actually said this, I can't confirm, I can't deny. You had an opportunity to do exactly what you told the judge you were going to do 1 month after you said it, and you didn't do it. Why not?
Again, it wasn't our responsibility to be the fact checker for the news agencies.
This is the biggest story in the country.
So please let me. The president says so far approximately 9,000.
I got 8 seconds. I got 8 seconds. I'll let you finish.
Chairman, may I please finish?
The special counsel said something they've never done. They said that story was false. Now you can respond.
Okay. My response. The president has told something over 9,000 lies to date. Do I ask Mr. Davis or Mr. Monaco, or do I go on television in order to correct his mistakes?
When Mr. Davis goes on to talk about that specific subject, you should.
The answer is no. And I would like to
also... time has, listen up. The gentleman's time has expired. You may finish answering the question, and then we're going to go to Mr. Connolly.
All I wanted to say is I just find it interesting, sir, that between yourself and your colleagues, that not one question so far since I'm here has been asked about President Trump. That's actually why I thought I was coming today, not to confess the mistakes that I've made. I've already done that, and I'll do it again every time you ask me about taxes or mistakes. Yes, I made my mistakes. I'll say it now again, and I'm going to pay the ultimate price. But I'm not here today, and the American people don't care about my taxes. They want to know what it is that I know about Mr. Trump, and not one question so far has been asked about Mr. Trump.
Mr. Connolly.
Would the gentleman yield?
Yield to Mr. Meadows.
Mr. Chairman, may I finish?
Mr. Cohen.
May I finish?
Mr. Cohen, he's yielded to me, and so.
I didn't finish, sir, my response.
Listen, everything's been made.
Mr. Chairman, may I finish my response, please?
I'll let you respond, but let's answer his question, please.
Mr. Cohen, everything's been made of your lies in the past. I'm concerned about your lies today. Under your testimony just a few minutes ago, to me, you indicated that you had contracts with foreign entities, and yet we have a truth and testimony disclosure form which requires you to list those foreign contracts for the last 2 years, and you put NA on there. And it's a criminal offense to not have that accurately. So when were you lying? Either in the testimony to me earlier today or when you filled out the form?
The gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Cohen, you may answer his question and then whatever you wanted to say on that.
His question is, unfortunately, I don't have an answer for his question. But as
no, Mr. Chairman.
As it relates.
The gentleman is out of order. He said he does not have an answer.
Mr. Chairman, when we were in the majority, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, hold on.
Regular order. The gentleman has just said he doesn't have an answer. And you had already gone over your time.
Well, he's under oath to tell the truth. One of them is not accurate, Mr. Chairman.
You'll have time to answer questions.
Mr. Chairman, just a question. Mr. Chairman, just a question.
Mr. Raskin.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to clear up something, just a little something that bothers me. You started off your testimony, and you said, I think, in response to some question, that President Trump never expected to win. I just want to clarify that I dealt with President Trump several times as he was trying to get Wisconsin. He was always confident. He was working very hard. And this idea that somehow he was just running to raise his profile for some future adventure, at least in my experience, is preposterous. And I always I'll find it offensive when anti-Trump people imply that he just did this on a lark and didn't expect to win. But be that as it may, my first question concerns your relationship with the court. Do you expect, I mean, right now I think you're sentenced to 3 years, correct?
That's correct.
Do you expect any time using this testimony, other testimony, after you get done doing whatever you're going to do this week, do you ever expect to go back and ask for any sort of reduction in sentence?
Yes, there are ongoing investigations currently being conducted that have nothing to do with this committee or Congress that I am assisting in, and it is for the benefit of a Rule 35 motion, yes.
So you expect, and perhaps what you testify here today will affect going back and reducing this, what we think is a relatively light 3-year sentence. You expect to go back and ask for a further reduction?
Based off of my appearance here today?
Well, based upon whatever you do between now and your request for...
The Rule 35 motion is in the complete hands of the Southern District of New York. And the way the Rule 35 motion works is what you're supposed to do is provide them with information that leads to ongoing investigations. I am currently working with them right now on several other issues of investigation that concerns them that they're looking at. If those investigations become fruitful, then there is a possibility for a Rule 35 motion. And I don't know what the benefit in terms of time would be. But this congressional hearing today is not going to be the basis of a Rule 35 motion. I wish it was, but it's not.
I'd like to yield some time to Congressman Jordan.
I yield to the gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Cohen, I'm going to come back to the question I asked before with regards to your false statement that you submitted to Congress. On here, it was very clear that it asked for contracts with foreign entities over the last 2 years? Have you had any foreign contract with foreign entities, whether it's Novartis or the Korean Airline or Kazakhstan BTA Bank? Your testimony earlier said that you had contracts with them. In fact, you went into detail
Sir, I believe
on
it
those
talks
contracts.
about lobbying. I did no lobbying. On top of
In
that,
your
they are not
testimony,
government.
I'm not asking about lobbying, Mr. Cohen.
They
I'm
are
saying,
not government agencies.
Do
They are
you
private-
have
they
do
are
you have
privately or
foreign
publicly
contracts?
traded companies.
Do you have foreign contracts?
I currently have no foreign
Did you have foreign contracts over the last 2 years?
foreign contracts.
Contracts with foreign entities. Did you have
Yes.
contracts? Yes.
Yes.
Why didn't you put them on the form? It says it's a criminal offense to not put them on this form for the last 2 years. Why did you not do that?
Because those foreign companies that you're referring to are not government companies.
It says non-governmental, Mr. Cohen. You signed it.
They're talking about me as being non-governmental.
And right, it says foreign agency. It says foreign contracts. Do you want us to read it to you?
I read it, and it was reviewed by my counsel, and I am a non-government employee. It was not lobbying, and they are not foreign.
This has nothing to do with lobbying. It says it's a criminal offense to not list all your foreign contracts. That's what it says.
Well, then I'm going to take a look at it before I leave.
No, you've
Hopefully
heard-
I will, and hopefully I will amend it prior to leaving, because that's not the way I read your document.
You know, it's just one more example, Mr. Cohen, of you skirting the truth. Okay, I want to ask one other question.
Sir,
One other
that's-
question, Mr. Cohen. It's my time, not yours. Were you advised, or was your counsel advised, to withhold your written testimony to the latest possible date, as John Dean said last night on CNN?
Was it my what?
Were you advised, or was your counsel advised, to withhold your written testimony to this committee at the latest possible date, to get it to this committee at the latest possible date, as John Dean said that he advised you? Yes or no?
No. We were
He never advised you.
John Dean? I've never spoken with John Dean.
Has he spoken to your attorney?
I don't know. I've never spoken
Well,
to
ask
John
your
Dean.
attorney. He's right
we were
there behind
working
you.
last night till 11, 12 o'clock at
You've
night.
known
in
that
order
you've been coming for some time.
You may answer the question. Answer the question.
We were working till 11, 12 o'clock last night to finish everything.
So you were writing it last night, Mr. Cohen?
we were
Don't
making
give me
edits.
that bull.
We were making edits all the way through the night.
Recognize Mr. Ruda.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Earlier you said you started the campaign.
That's correct. In 2011,
You started the campaign for President of the United States for Donald Trump?
I certainly did, sir.
Now that's news.
ShouldTrumpRun.com.
Wow.
2011 was my idea. I saw a document in the newspaper that said, who'd you vote for in 2012? 6% of the
Michael
people
Cohen.
said,
Michael
Cohen.
Cohen.
6% of the
Michael
people
Cohen
turned around and
first.
said they'd vote for
The
Donald
reason
Trump.
Donald Trump is president is because
So I
Michael
brought
Cohen
it into
started?
his office, and I said to him, Mr. Trump, take a look at this. He goes, well, wouldn't that be great? And with that is where it all started.
Yeah. Okay. Like I'm sure he had never thought of anything like that until you came.
No,
in.
I didn't
Let me ask
say
you
that
one
he
question.
didn't
I
think
got 8
about it.
seconds. I got 8 seconds. What did you talk to Mr. Schiff about?
I spoke to Mr. Schiff about topics that were going to be raised at the upcoming hearing.
Whoa. Not just what time to show up, actually what you're going to talk about?
The gentleman's time has expired.
Wow.
Mr. Sarbanes.
Mr. Cohen, earlier you said the United States Southern District of New York is not accurate in that statement.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Earlier you said that the United States Southern District of New York Attorney's Office, that statement is not accurate. You said it's not a lie, you said it's not accurate. You stand by that?
Yes, I did not want a role in the new administration.
So the court's wrong?
Sir, can I finish,
Sure.
please? I got exactly the role that I wanted. There is no shame in being personal attorney to the president. I got exactly what I wanted. I asked Mr. Trump for that job, and he gave it to me.
All I'm asking, if I could, and I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman, you're saying that statement from the Southern District of New York attorneys is wrong.
I'm saying I didn't write it, and it's not accurate.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Welch.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding. Earlier, Mr. Cohen, the gentlelady from California talked about this this tape.
I'm sorry, sir, I can't hear you.
Earlier, the gentlelady from California talked about this tape, this elevator tape that you said does not exist.
That's correct. I do not believe it exists.
But is it also your testimony that the Trump team was willing to pay to make sure a story about a non-existent tape never became public?
No, sir, that's not what I said.
They were willing to stop a false tape?
We learned that this tape was potentially on the market and that it existed. And so what we did is exactly what we did with all the other catch and kill. We looked for it. And if, in fact, that it did exist, we would have tried to stop it. That's what I would have done.
False tape.
But it's a false tape. I've never heard it, and I can assure you one thing about Mr. Trump. Many things, he would never, ever do something like that. I don't see it.
Ms. Kelly. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll come to order. Mr. Cohen, I want to finalize this issue relating to your truth in testimony form. The form requires you to list your contracts or payments originating from a foreign government, not from all foreign entities. We said we would give you a chance to consult with your attorneys. Have you done that, and do you have any additional information?
My 4 attorneys continue to believe, as they did before, that the language of the truth in testimony form, which I was given and signed just right before this hearing, and which requires disclosure of any contracts or payments from foreign governments in the last 2 years, did not apply to my work for BTA Bank, which is a Kazakh-owned entity. They advised that had entities been intended for disclosure, that word would have been in the disclosure definition. However, if the committee's counsel has a different view that I should disclose my contract with BTA Bank, we'd be willing to do that.
All right. Now,
Mr. Chairman.
Let me finish.
Sure.
I want to understand clearly, you sought the advice of your counsel, is that right?
That's correct.
And your counsel advised you to say what you just said, is that right?
That's correct.
And you know that to be the truth, is that right?
Yes, sir.
I will yield to the gentleman from
I thank the chairman for his courtesy. Mr. Chairman, instead of making points of order and going back and forth on this, perhaps a way to solve this is for the chairman to request Mr. Cohen give to this committee all the foreign payments that he has received over the last 2 years, whether they're an entity or a government, because we have strong belief, Mr. Chairman, there's over $900,000 that came from the government of Kazakhstan on behalf of Mr. Cohen, and it is either the truth or the whole truth or nothing but the truth. And the rules, Mr. Chairman, really look at foreign payments that come from or with foreign governments. And the bank he's talking about is owned 81% by the Kazakhstan government.
reclaiming my time, and then we're going to move on. What I will take, first of all, let me be clear. I said to Mr. Cohen that if he came in here and lied, I would nail him to the cross. Didn't I? Did I tell you that?
Yes, you did more than once.
All right. So if there's any ambiguity, I want that to be cleared up. I have no problem in working with you to make sure that's straightened out, because I don't want it to be a thing where he thinks one thing, we think one thing, and we can clear that up. All right. All right. We have another members that have been waiting.
But just on that subject, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I don't think we should limit it just to the BTA Bank, which has the affiliation with Kazakhstan. I think we should also look at Korea Aerospace Industries, one of his other clients, and any other client that's foreign that may have some connection to that respective country's government. I hope him and his attorneys look at all those and we get the form exactly right as Mr. Meadows wants.
Reclaiming my time, we will take that certainly under advisement. I'm a man of my word. We will work with you and see what we can do to come up with that. I don't think that it's an unreasonable request.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
All right, go ahead.
I ask unanimous consent that we read into or for the record, a tweet from Dr. Darrell Scott, which says, Michael Cohen asked, no, begged me repeatedly to ask POTUS to give him a job in the administration. He is still lying under oath. I ask unanimous consent.
No objection.
I have one more from Bob Deedle. Getting sick watching these hearings. I know Michael Cohen personally for many years, and he told me several times that he was very angry and upset that he didn't get a post in the White House, and that he, quote, would do what he has to do now to protect his family, close quote. I ask that that be.
Mr. Chairman.
I thank you.
Mr. Chairman, two quick ones.
And then if we got other ones, we're going to do you, Mr. Ranking Member, then we'll do the other ones at the end, because I have some things, too, that I want to get in. Go ahead.
All right. I ask unanimous consent that an article in Salon magazine written by Stanley Brand, former House counsel to Tip O'Neill, titled the article is Oversight Committee Session with Michael Cohen Looks Like an Illegitimate Show Hearing.
Without objection, so ordered.
I ask unanimous consent that a letter that Mr. Meadows and I sent to you, the chairman, requesting that you call Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to testify at this hearing also be part of the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond?
Just 1 second, all right? The article by Mr. Brand,
yep.
I just want to deal with this one right away. When we saw that article, Mr. Ranking Member, we knew that it was inaccurate. I mean, just on basics. I mean, the cases that Mr. Brand used are definitely distinguishable for what's going on here. And so we got Irvin B. Nathan, former general counsel of the House from 2007 to 2010, and she says, in short, the committee has ample jurisdiction and responsibility to hear and consider the upcoming voluntary testimony of Mr. Cohen. That's dated February 25th, 2019, and I want to enter that into record without objection, so ordered. I wanted to get to Ms. Talib, and then I'll come to you, okay? Ms. Talib, I mean, they've been waiting here all day. Ms. Talib?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, all of you, for centering this committee on our sole purpose is exposing the truth. And some of my colleagues can't handle the truth, and this is unfortunate because it's the center of what is protecting our country right now. The people at home are frustrated, Mr. Cohen, and they want criminal schemes to stop, especially those from the Oval Office. Mr. Cohen, I am upset and know that my residents feel the same way, that a man you worked for the past 10 years is using the most powerful position in the world to hurt our country solely for personal gain. We are upset that some of our colleagues here are so disconnected of what it means to have this President of the United States sending checks to cover bribe payments, not hush payments, bribe payments you made on his behalf. One in 2017 of March, and another August 2017 after he was sworn in as president. They are upset that while my colleagues are trying to discredit your testimony by some of your own unlawful acts and lies, that they are disconnected with the fact that you were the personal lawyer for this President of the United States, that this President chose you as his legal counsel. My stance has always been the same, Mr. Chairman, based on the facts, not on future reports that we're all waiting on. My residents back home don't need a collusion clause with a foreign government to know this President, Individual 1, has disregarded the law of the land, the United States Constitution, and that he has misused his pardon powers. In the sentencing memo, Mr. Cohen, filed by the federal prosecutors in New York in December of last year, they stated, quote, in particular, and as Cohen himself has now admitted with respect to both payments, he acted in coordination with and at the direction of Individual 1. Mr. Cohen, as you know, President Donald J. Trump brand comes first, not the American people. Based on what you know now, based on what we know now, is that Individual 1 used his money, businesses, and platform to enrich himself, his brand, and then the process directed you, Mr. Cohen, to commit multiple felonies, and you covered it up, correct?
That's correct.
You called it protecting his brand, correct?
And him as well.
Mr. Cohen, with this, Do you think the President of the United States is making decisions in the best interest of the American people?
No, I don't.
Especially those you said that he used horrible words about, like African Americans, Muslim Americans, and immigrants?
Yes.
Just to make a note, Mr. Chairman, just because someone has a person of color, a black person, working for them does not mean they aren't racist. And it is insensitive that some would even say it's the fact that someone would actually use a prop, a black woman, in this chamber, in this committee, is own racist in itself. Donald Trump is setting a precedent.
Mr. Chairman, I ask that her words be taken down.
Donald Trump is setting a precedent. I reclaim my time.
Mr. Chairman.
Trump is setting a precedent.
Mr.
That
Chairman.
the highest office can be attained
Mr. Chairman, the
through
rules
legal
are clear.
activity, cover up and hold on to business assets to break campaign finance laws and constitutional clauses. What we have here, Mr. Chairman, is criminal conduct and the pursuit of the highest public office by Mr. Cohen and Individual 1. I hope that the gravity of this situation hits everyone in this body and in Congress and across this country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield the rest of my time.
Mr. Chairman, I ask that her words, when she's referring to an individual member of this body, be taken down and stricken from the record. I'm sure she didn't intend to do this, but if anyone knows my record as it relates, it should be you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, I would like to.
Hold on.
I want the words read back.
No.
We want to know exactly what she
excuse
said
me.
about a colleague.
Excuse me. Would you like to rephrase that statement, Ms. Tlaib?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can actually read it from here. Just to make a note, Mr. Chairman, that just because someone has a person of color, a black person working for them, does not mean they are racist. And it is insensitive that someone would even say racist, say it is racist in itself, and to use a black woman as a prop to prove it otherwise. And I can submit this for the record. If a colleague is thinking that that's what I'm saying, I'm just saying that's what I believe to have happened. And if, as a person of color in this committee, that's how I felt at that moment, and I wanted to express that. But I am not calling the gentleman, Mr. Meadows, a racist for doing so. I'm saying that in itself, it is a racist act.
Well, I hope not, Mr. Chairman, because I need to be clear on this particular. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Meadows, wait a minute.
I've defended you with false accusations.
Mr. Meadows.
Yes, sir, you are.
Thank you. Right. I will clear this up. Now, Ms. Tlaib, I want to make sure I understand. You were not intending to call Mr. Meadows a racist, is that right?
No, Mr. Chairman, I do not call Mr. Meadows a racist. I am trying, as a person of color, Mr. Chairman, just to express myself and how I felt at that moment. And so, just for the record, that's what was my intention.
All right. Mr. Meadows.
Mr. Chairman, there's nothing more personal to me than my relationship. My nieces and nephews are people of color. Not many people know that. You know that, Mr. Chairman. And to indicate that I asked someone who is a personal friend of the Trump family, who has worked for him, who knows this particular individual, that she's coming in to be a prop, it's racist to suggest that I asked her to come in here for that reason. Mr. President, the President's own person, she's a family member. She loves this family. She came in because she felt like the President of the United States was getting falsely accused. And Mr. Chairman, you and I have a personal relationship that's not based on color. And to even go down this direction is wrong, Mr. Chairman.
First of all, I want to thank the gentleman for what you have stated. If there's anyone who is sensitive with regard to race, it's me. Son of former sharecroppers that were basically slaves. So I get it. I listened very carefully to Ms. Tlaib, and I think, and I'm not going to put words in her mouth, but I think she said that she was not calling you a racist. And I thought that we could clarify that, because Mr. Meadows, you know, and of all the people on this committee, I've said it and got in trouble for it, that you're one of my best friends. I know that shocks a lot of people.
And likewise, Mr. Chairman.
But you are. And I could see and feel your pain. I feel it. And so, and I don't think Ms. Salib intended to cause you that kind of pain and that kind of frustration. Did you have a statement, Ms. Salib? I'm going to yield to you. We can just straighten this up.
Mr. Chairman, and to my colleague, Mr. Meadows, that was not my intention, and I do apologize if that's what it sounded like, but I said someone in general. And as everybody knows in this chamber, I'm pretty direct, so if I wanted to say that, I would have, but that's not what I said. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to clarify, but again, I said someone. And again, I was not referring to you at all as a racist.
Well, I thank the gentlewoman for her comments. I thank the chairman for working to clarify this, and I appreciate the chairman's intervening.
Now, to the gentleman, first of all, thank you for allowing us to resolve that. The gentleman had asked a little bit earlier.
I will withdraw my request.
Oh, you don't want to do the unanimous consent?
I need the unanimous consent, but I think I need to officially withdraw my request that it be stricken from.
Go on, withdraw it. You did it?
I did.
All right, sounds good. Now, I will recognize you for your unanimous consent. I think you want to put in the record some documents.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent that we put forward in the record the Vanity Fair article, which indicates that Michael Cohen must be the most gifted consultant in America, outlining his insights into government, healthcare, and policy and real estate, suggesting that it's not a real company, but and just like he's not a lawyer.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. I ask unanimous consent that the LA Times article of July 16, 2018 actually be put in the record, which outlines the $1.2 million payment and their misgivings thereafter.
Without objection, so ordered. Any other unanimous consent requests? Size.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to make the February 9th, 2019 Washington Post profile of Michael Cohen, titled Michael Cohen's Secret Agenda, part of the record. This story shows Cohen to be a selfish manipulator who is all about himself. It even has a false anecdote about how he once claimed to deliver his own son, his own baby.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to make the May 9th, 2018 Washington Post article, South Korean firm paid Michael Cohen $150,000 as it sought contract from U.S. government as part of the record. The article reported Korea Aerospace Industries paid a shell company run by Cohen.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to make Michael Cohen's sentencing statement to the Southern District of New York part of the record. The statement establishes that Michael Cohen continues to falsely blame his crimes on blind loyalty to the president, but only Cohen is to blame for his many false statements to financial institutions and the IRS.
Without objection, so ordered.
I ask unanimous consent to make the August 20th, 2018 CNN article, Fed scrutinizing Michael Cohen's former accountant and bank loans, part of the record. Cohen's accountant was subpoenaed to appear before a grand jury and required a lawyer. In his sentencing memo, prosecutors said Cohen attempted to blame his tax evasion on his accountant.
Without objection, so ordered.
Two more, real quickly.
Sure.
Ask unanimous consent to make the February 26, 2019 order filed by the Appellate Division of the State of New York regarding disciplinary proceedings against Michael Cohen part of the record. This order, which proactively applies starting February 28th, establishes Cohen committed a serious crime and ceased being an attorney when he was convicted of lying to Congress.
Without objection, so ordered.
And finally, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to make the July 26, 2018 Washington Post article, Michael Cohen secretly recorded Trump. Does that make him a bad lawyer? Part of the record. The article describes potential ethical violations of a lawyer, Cohen, recording his client, Trump, without the client's knowledge.
Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Norman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous
consent to make the January 18, 2019 Huffington Post article 11 tweets from the fake fan account, Stud, Michael Cohen paid to fawn over him, part of the record. The account is described as a place for women who love and support Michael Cohen. Strong pit bull, sex symbol, no nonsense, business oriented, and ready to make it.
Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask unanimous consent to make the April 20th, 2018 article in Mother Jones titled "Michael Cohen Says He's Never Been to Prague. He Told Me a Different Story," part of the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, sir.
Very well. Mr. Cohen, I have some concluding remarks. But before I do that, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would. I have some closing remarks I would like to say myself. Is this an appropriate time?
You can do it now.
Thank you. So first I want to thank you, Chairman, because I appreciate the opportunity to share some final thoughts. I have acknowledged I have made my own mistakes, and I have owned up to them publicly and under oath. But silence and complicity in the face of the daily destruction of our basic norms and civility to one another will not be one of them. I did things and I acted improperly, at times at Mr. Trump's behest. I blindly followed his demands. My loyalty to Mr. Trump has cost me everything: my family's happiness, friendships, my law license, my company, my livelihood, my honor, my reputation, and soon my freedom. And I will not sit back, say nothing, and allow him to do the same to the country. Indeed, given my experience working for Mr. Trump, I fear that if he loses the election in 2020, that there will never be a peaceful transition of power. And this is why I agreed to appear before you today. In closing, I'd like to say directly to the President, we honor our veterans even in the rain. You tell the truth even when it doesn't aggrandize you. You respect the law and our incredible law enforcement agents. You don't villainize them. You don't disparage generals, Gold Star families, prisoners of war who had the courage to fight for this country. You don't attack the media and those who question what you don't like or what you don't want them to say. And you take responsibility for your own dirty deeds. You don't use your power of your bully pulpit to destroy the credibility of those who speak out against you. You don't separate families from one another or demonize those looking to America for a better life. You don't vilify people based on the God they pray to, and you don't cuddle up to our adversaries at the expense of our allies. And finally, you don't shut down the government before Christmas and New Year's just to simply appease your base. This behavior is churlish, it denigrates the office of the President, and it's simply un-American. And it's not you. So to those who support the President and his rhetoric, as I once did, I pray the country doesn't make the same mistakes that I have made or pay the heavy price that my family and I are paying. And I thank you very much for this additional time, Chairman.
Thank you very much. The ranking member has a closing statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We know Mr. Cohen has been dishonest in the past. That's why he's going to prison in 2 months. But there are things today that he said during the several hours of questioning that just don't add up either. He said he never defrauded any bank when he was having a conversation questioning from Mr. Comer. Obviously, that's not true because he's going to prison for that very offense. He said today he was a good lawyer who understood the need to represent his client with legal advice. But in his written testimony, he said he never bothered to consider whether payments to women were improper, much less the right thing to do. He attested in his signed truth and testimony form that he did not have any reportable contracts with foreign government entities. Earlier, he admitted to having consulting agreements with at least 2 foreign entities owned in part by foreign governments, BTA Bank of Kazakhstan and Korea Aerospace Industries of South Korea. He said to Chairman Cummings that Donald Trump directed him and the Trump Organization CFO Alan Weiselberg to, quote, go back to his office and figure out how to make the $130,000 payment. But in his testimony, he says, Mr. Trump directed me to use my own personal funds from the home equity line of credit to avoid any money being traced back to him that could negatively impact the campaign. And in response to a question about him paying to set up the fake Twitter account at Women for Cohen, that he didn't direct the commission of that Twitter account. He says, I didn't set that up, and it was done by a young lady that works for the firm, when in fact, he did ask the IT firm Redfinch to set it up, according to the owner of Redfinch. And finally, he said he didn't want a job with the administration, even though the attorneys with the Southern District of New York stated that this was a fact. When asked about this, they said, I wouldn't call them liars, but that statement is not accurate. Mr. Chairman, I think maybe more importantly is what we should have been doing today. Mr. Meadows and I sent you a letter asking you to have Mr. Rosenstein here. I think it's important to know that last week when you announced that Mr. Cohen was coming this week, just happened to be the very same week that we learned the Deputy Attorney General of the United States was thinking about wearing a wire to record the Commander-in-Chief, was actually contemplating talking to cabinet members and invoking the 25th Amendment. That's what we should be focused on, not this sad display we've had to go through the last several hours. And again, it's not my words. You can take the words of the former General Counsel for the House of Representatives under Tip O'Neill. So I hope we've learned some things here today. But Mr. Chairman, as I said earlier, your first big hearing, the first announced witness of the 116th Congress, is a gentleman who is going to prison in 2 months for lying to Congress. I don't think that's what we should be focused on. Yield back.
Thank you very much. You know, I've sat here and I've listened to all of this, and it's very painful. It's very painful. You made a lot of mistakes, Mr. Cohen, and you've admitted that. And, you know, one of the saddest parts of this whole thing is that some very innocent people are hurting too. And you acknowledge that. And that's your family. And so you come here today and I deep in my heart, you know, and when I practiced law, I represented a lot of lawyers who got in trouble. And you've come saying I had made my mistakes, but now I want to change my life. And you know, if we as a nation did not give people an opportunity after they made mistakes to change their lives, a whole lot of people would not do very well. I don't know where you go from here. As I sat here and I listened to both sides, I just felt as if, and you know, people are now using my words that they took from me, that didn't give me any credit. We're better than this. We are so much, we really are. As a country, we are so much better than this. And, you know, I told you, and for some reason, Mr. Cohen, I tell my children, I say when bad things happen to you, do not ask the question, why did it happen to me? Ask the question, why did it happen for me? I don't know why this is happening for you. But it is my hope that a small part of it is for our country to be better. If I hear you correctly, it sounds like you're crying out for a new normal, for us getting back to normal. It sounds to me like you want to make sure that our democracy stays intact. The one meeting I had with President Trump, I said to him, the greatest gift that you and I, Mr. President, can give to our children is making sure that we give them a democracy that is intact. A democracy better than the one that we came upon. And I'm hoping that the things you said today will help us begin to get back there. You know, I mean, come on now. I mean, when you got, according to the Washington Post, our president has made at least 8,718 false or misleading statements. That's stunning. That's not what we teach our children. I don't teach mine that. And for whatever reason, it sounds like you got caught up in it. You got caught up in it. You got caught up in it. And some kind of way, I hope that you will, I know that it's painful going to prison. I know it's got to be painful being called a rat. And let me explain. A lot of people don't know the significance of that, but I live in the inner city of Baltimore. All right? And when you call somebody a rat, that's one of the worst things you can call them, because when they go to prison, that means a snitch. I'm just saying. And so the president called you a rat. We're better than that. We really are. And I'm hoping that all of us can get back to this democracy that we want and that we should be passing on to our children so that they can do better than what we did. And so you wonder whether people believe you. I don't know. I don't know whether they believe you. But the fact is that you come, you have your head down, and this has got to be one of the hardest things that you could do. Let me tell you the picture that really, really pained me. You were leaving the prison, you were leaving the courthouse, and I guess it's your daughter had a braces or something on. Man, that thing hurt me. As a father of two daughters, it hurt me. And I can imagine how it must feel for you. But I'm just saying to you, I want to first of all thank you. I know that this has been hard. I know that you face a lot. I know that you are worried about your family. But this is a part of your destiny. And hopefully, this portion of your destiny will lead to a better Michael Cohen, a better Donald Trump, a better United States of America, and a better world. And I mean that from the depths of my heart. When we're dancing with the angels, the question will be asked, in 2019, what did we do to make sure we kept our democracy intact? Did we stand on the sidelines and say nothing? Did we play games? And I'm tired of these statements saying, people come in here and say, oh, this is the first hearing. It is not the first hearing. The first hearing was with regard to prescription drugs. Remember, a little girl, a lady sat there, Miss Wortham, her daughter died because she could not get $333 a month in insulin. That was our first hearing. Second hearing, H.R. 1, voting rights, corruption in government. Come on now. We can do more than one thing. And we have got to get back to normal. With that, this meeting is adjourned.
Last week that I don't believe anything Andy McCabe said, but we know last week Andy McCabe said that Rod Rosenstein was serious about wearing a wire, and he was the third person to say that. So I'm sure Michael Cohen said maybe a couple things that were accurate, like he never was in problem. Okay.
Thank you.